Hi and welcome back to our wellness concept series. Today we're going to be going through my G.A.P Theory principle. And today what I'm going to be answering is a question that most people ask. And that is, how did my body get to a point where it's not feeling the best? How do I get to a point where I can't do the gardening anymore or run around with the kids or even do something simple like sleep on the couch? Well, today we're going to answer those questions. So what does G.A.P mean? Well, G.A.P is an acronym and it means General Adaptive Potential. What does that actually mean? Well, remember that our bodies are designed to adapt. It's designed to cope with our stressful lifestyles. And if we couldn't do that, well, then we wouldn't survive. So big picture is we always remember that our bodies are meant to self-heal and self-regulate. And our nervous system is the most important part of our bodies. It helps us take information about what's happening in our surroundings and then make minute changes so that we can actually survive in our environment. Well, what causes then our body's ability to reduce down in its adaptive potential? Well, in one word, subluxations. Now remember, subluxations is this buzzword that all chiropractors use. But remember, it refers to the misalignments inside the spine that causes this miscommunication between the brain and the body. Much like you having a phone call and the signal is really, really bad. We can't quite hear exactly what's going on, so then we're trying to make the best guess possible. And most of the time when that happens, when we have subluxation, well, it gets it wrong more often than not. So what then causes subluxations? Well, it comes down to stress. Stress, remember, all of us go through. We have positive and we have negative stress. Positive stress is the stuff that builds our bodies up and is actually really helpful for us, but negative stress is what tears it down. And when we have negative stress and when we start to create lots and lots of levels of that, and when it starts to overwhelm our bodies, well, our bodies start creating these subluxations, much like a fuse that blows in a fuse box. And the more and more we have that, the worse our bodies become. But let's go back to this G.A.P theory. Let's make this a little bit more tangible. So here's this diagram here. Here, this refers to our nervous system function. So we've got 100% and we've got 0%. And what we also find with this over here is that we've also got stress. So stress takes many forms, but we also know stress changes over time. So we've got different varying levels of stress, right? And this is life. But in the midst of that, we have our ability to cope with that. And this is where the G.A.P theory comes into play. Now, we would assume that over time, we'd be able to keep 100% of our nerve function. Because remember that when we're born with a blank canvas. We're born with basically 100% of nerve function. But what causes it to reduce down? Remember, we talked about subluxations. Well, subluxations, we said, was a result of overwhelming negative stress. And what happens when we have subluxations is it reduces now our ability to function at 100%. So maybe this is 95% at the moment. But are you starting to see what's happening? It's now reaching the threshold by which our normal, stressful daily lives are. And what we find is when we start to peak over that, it starts to cause dysfunction. Now, there may be signs of pain or inflammation or injury, but it could be other things a lot more subtle than that. But regardless, what will end up happening is it starts creating layers. Like we talked about in our last video, we know that when we have one subluxation, it starts to create other levels of subluxation. And then eventually, globally, it starts to reduce this down. And eventually now we've got another level where it reduces down. And this process continues and continues. That doesn't happen over weeks, it doesn't even happen over months, but it happens over years. And if we don't take care of this issue, eventually, even the smallest amount of stress, like running after the kids, or maybe bending down, or maybe doing the gardening, or maybe moving stuff from the shed to the garden, those are the things that are causing inflammation. Those are the things that are causing pain. Those are the things that are stopping us from doing what we're actually wanting to do, and that's our life's goals. Well, how do we get rid of it? How do we solve the problem? Well, pretty simple. Let's get rid of the subluxation and let's get this threshold to go back to where it was always designed to be, and that was at 100%. And that's really what chiropractic is all about. It's about reducing the amount of stress that's in your body, and improving your general adaptive potential. So always remember this, is that every adjustment is always going to build on each other. But the more and more we get you back to your balance and back to your peak, the more and more you can go back to life. And if we can show you ways to stop recreating the problems, well, I think that's going to give you a long-term result, isn't it? So look, I hope this helped, and I hope this video this week helped to explain why we sometimes go through the periods where the small things start to cause big issues. But look, if we take care of those issues well before they become worse, we'll have a great result in the future. So have a great week, and look forward to seeing you on our next video. Take care.